The Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing.
Hello, welcome to The Unconventional Therapists. My name is Dave. I'm here with Greg, and this is your guide to nothing.
That's right.
Forever and ever.
Forever and ever.
The thing that you will always look to when you want to know absolutely nothing.
That's right.
About it.
We do have to add that in every once in a while.
It's a disclaimer. It's a disclaimer, Greg. So I say this disclaimer because I think that it's important for us to acknowledge that while we do feel like we've learned about the topics that we talk about, and for some we've learned in the past and some it's a rather new learning, we also want people to understand that like we're touching the basics. We're not like,
I like to say scratching the surface.
And our intention with these surfaces is for you to dig further in after. And maybe this is a conversation piece that you have with a family member that can't stand you and you guys argue about it forever, or your sibling or your spouse or your partner or whatever, but it's conversation starters. And that's really what's important to us. I know we talk about mental health stuff sometimes. And again, that's more for general information, not to be a substitute for actual help that should be sought. If you do connect or feel like some of the stuff we're talking about is stuff that is stuff you're struggling with. I noticed, like, Greg, I was thinking about this. I think I mentioned this to you a long time ago. I was like, we don't have a disclaimer on our podcast. And I wonder if we should, or if it's kind of already understood. But I was listening somewhat recently and I heard disclaimers and I was like, Well,
here's the thing. I think the name of the show is disclaimer in and of itself. So there's that. And I think that one thing that we always offer people is our own personal insight, which, you know, it's going to be subjective. To some people that might mean a lot to them and to some people it won't. But what I will say, as far as a mental health themed podcast, is the ones that read very strictly mental health. I mean, your depression, your anxiety, bipolar, borderline, CBT, any of those. I genuinely stand behind the idea that though you can genuinely get something that might help you out of those.
Yes, not to say that they're not helpful, but they're not a substitute for actual mental health counseling, inpatient in a hospital, whatever, all that stuff. Like, I don't want people to listen and think like, oh yeah, I'm learning about myself, so I don't need to do X, Y, and Z. That's not ever going to be the case. So absolutely. And Greg, an even better disclaimer would be if I change the name of this podcast to Two Dummies Guide to Nothing.
Exactly. But we have to use, I'm going to go to school for nothing. We got to throw that little cloud.
Two dum-dums.
Yeah, two dum-dums. That's, that's what it ends up being anyway. Hey, listen, so this is a hell of a lot of more small talk than usual and disclaimers and all that fun stuff. And, the one time that I prepare something that's a little bit of small talk towards the subject, you offer quite a bit.
I railroaded, if you will.
You did. My name, Gregory, means the watcher. And that's going to play a little role in this episode here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because on this one, we're going to talk about.
Hey, Greg, what does my name mean?
Dave, son of.
You didn't look that up, did you?
No. Does it mean son of something, though?
It's crazy that you looked up your name and didn't think to also look up mine in your idea of like what small talk was supposed to look like.
Right.
About yourself.
I just small talk is just like you just say a little fun fact about yourself.
About myself and only talk about myself.
And then you say moving right along. Okay. So listen, fame. That's what we're talking about.
Gracious gift.
Is that what it means?
I believe so.
Right. It's biblical. I know that. Fame, Dave, is our episode where we're talking about fame here, which is something that can affect and influence the behavior not only of those people who are famous, celebrities and whoever else, but it also affects the behavior of people who perceive the fame or people who experience them. So we're going to talk about what might be going on there from a psychological standpoint. Also, we're going to dip a toe in a not so invisible or inevitable side effect, stalking.
All right.
So I'm interested in that.
Yeah. Greg,
both of these things.
I gotta say, I also have an interest.
Well, hopefully not too much. Hopefully it's not obsessive.
No, I would say it's a healthy amount, but I also just want to give a quick shout out. So this episode was recommended a long time ago by a faithful listener, Corleen Machine.
The best.
This is actually the second episode, I believe, that they recommended. This was a long time coming, though, because we had this on our list. But I'm not going to lie, it felt a little difficult.
It did.
And as I did the research, I was like, it lived up to my expectations. More so because not a lot of stuff specifically talks about fame. I can find stuff about famous people. I can find stuff about, all this stuff related to fame, but actually talking about the psychology of fame. Like you can find stuff about child stars and how fame ruins their lives. Like you can find that pretty easy.
Yeah.
But like the whole psychology behind fame, and Greg is going to like explain it to a T.
Wow.
Understand every aspect to it. Go ahead, Greg.
Well, thanks, Dave. Again, should I do another disclaimer?
I'm not going to do that.
Well, to me, you want to know what fame comes across as
soon as you say to me, I realize you're not going to.
Yeah, this is going to be a very subjective thing, or to a lot of us, or without us even knowing it, and maybe we even feel uncomfortable thinking this way.
Yeah,
but we act as if celebrities are superior to us, almost as if they're supernatural or divine. And it's not really a new concept throughout history. You see this with pharaohs and kings, and these imperial positions often have this, we're also a god. We're not only like in charge of, we're also a god, right? So Carl Jung has this interesting take, and we call them stars. And this is kind of an aside, and I'll get back into the religious part of it, but we call them stars, and we don't really think about why we do that. Like, do you have any idea why we call them stars?
Well, I kind of see it in like the form of like idolization and idols and like this whole, I don't know. That didn't really
historically
make sense, I guess, but
yeah, but like think of historically, what do we use stars for? Their guidance. We use them for navigation. They literally influence our direction and our path. And celebrities kind of do the same thing. We look to them to guide our behavior. We look to them for endorsements and clothes and glasses and whatever, cologne. We see all this stuff.
Yes, exactly. And Greg, I have to say, you just touched on two great points. And this is actually one of the big things that I wanted to get into when we're talking about fame.
Okay.
So fame in itself is what, Greg? Like, how would you define fame?
Easily recognizable, well-known, yes. Right?
Yep. All right, perfect. So the thing that isn't defined in that definition is what are they recognizable for, right? So that in some of the things that I was able to look into has changed over time in what causes a person to get fame. And I found this especially in American history of fame. This was a really interesting thing. Like around the time of the American Revolution, it was more revered if you were in a position of politics, military generals, religious leaders.
Paul revered.
What's that?
I said Paul revered.
Paul revered.
Yeah.
Revolutionary. I got you. I got your joke, Greg. So the idea is that you were known better for what you did, like serving, leading, rather than who you are. So that, just in that definition, obviously that's shifted quite a bit over time. Because Greg, one of the things you love to point out in every episode is we have a bunch of pop culture icons who literally are famous for doing nothing but being who they are, right?
Yeah, it's interesting.
So fame has a lot to do in its definition with what is important in society today. So right there, you get the whole psychology of fame. It is not, there's not a thing in particular that people have to be famous for in order for fame to happen. It's more of what society deems to be important.
That makes
isn't that weird?
It's
and interesting?
Cool. Yeah, it is. It's very interesting.
It's think about it. If I'm trying to think of like military leaders and things like that. Like I can't think of one. Like think of one. You probably could because you're like a guy that I feel like
Colin
would know
Powell.
stuff. He's literally the only person I could think of,
Yeah.
and he passed away. So like,
Right.
not, you know, I can't even think of one present day alive military general who is famous. And maybe I could, and I'm not.
Well,
even
it's that argument too, where it's like I can think of Courtney and Chloe and Kim Kardashian, but I can't think of. I can name maybe one or two, you know, female scholars or male scholars or athletes or whatever it is. Like there's just so much more that we can do with, like there's so much more recognition for those types of people these days. And you know,
Yes.
I don't even know if we're getting to like the definition of fame, just saying that's recognizable. It's something more, it's something, it makes you feel a certain way.
It's what we feel like is these are people that we find to be desirable, right?
Mhm.
They're desirable, they're achieved. There's something about their character that we kind of look at as like, this is kind of exactly who I would want to be or where I would want to be. And I'm going to give a shout out to another podcast because I can't take credit for a lot of this information, but American Hysteria did a really great episode about celebrity where I got a lot of this kind of shift in culture that I want to describe here because I think it fits this topic perfectly. So one of the big changes in our society and how we determined like, or how it changed and like how we view fame and who's more revered and who's considered idealistic is consumer capitalism. So that around the time where it became more desirable to achieve wealth status than it did like whatever your accomplishments were, that really started to change our society's like value systems. And people like J.P. Morgan, Thomas Edison, John D. Rockefeller, they became people because of their wealth and their status. They became people who were more looked at as famous. And as society shifted away from agriculture and more to like urban society, and leisure time became an idea that was suddenly developed, we were spending a lot of our time wanting to be entertained. And entertainment came in the form of, Greg, can you guess what, we were filling our downtime with?
TV.
Yeah, TV and movies, right?
Yeah. I still do that.
Yeah. And one of the things that became really important, and again, I'm going to shout out this podcast because like this isn't my own thought. This was something that I heard that I thought was such a great point on movies. The depiction of the actor is so intense. And we see all of their emotion playing out on their face, like there's close-ups, and it draws you into these characters way more than if like you're watching a play and you're kind of, there's like a distance. But like here we are now, we suddenly have like this up close view of the actors, and it makes us feel more connected to their emotions. And I think that really draws people in more.
I get that. That makes sense.
Individuals, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, because think about it like this, right? Like you can see like historically you see like the general, or even if you watch the news now, you see like these politicians and you see what they've done and you see what happened in the day. But when you're watching a movie, you're seeing the sadness, the lust, the passion, all these things. And that's the truth about life. And maybe that's what makes us connect to them a little bit more because we see them as truth.
Yeah.
Right.
And we relate to them. We can like kind of understand their emotion. They might, it's just so, and it's also becomes more individualistic. Whereas like in a play, you're seeing a bunch of characters bouncing off of each other. You're not focusing so much on one, but more about everybody that's involved. With the movie, you're seeing like, that's like the idea of like a movie star is suddenly starting to be developed because your focus is more on like one character. And that really was kind of like how movie stars developed, like how our attention to movie star like actors and this connection that we started to feel and this emphasis. And there's, if you want to look up the history of movie stars and how that like that really started, it's rather interesting, and we don't have the time to go into that on here.
Well, it is interesting because it almost makes me go right back to the religious thing, because it's like you're talking about when the movie star develops, and this is the ideal of what we could be as people. And in the same way that in the Bible, God created us in his image, That's exactly what we try to do with celebrities. We try to create ourselves in their image. And that's why they get all these endorsements and everything. And it's not only that. So to further the religious component of it, it's think about an autograph. It's a kind of relic or an icon where, like, for centuries, we would have like a saint's relic, like a saint's fingertip or something buried under a church, right? And why would you do that? Because it's the same thing with an autograph or a Michael J. Fox's, jacket, or I don't know. I'm just trying to like
vest.
the vest, right? Or the shoes or whatever, right? Like, why would you want something like that? You would want it because that was a time when you were in contact with something not divine, but something you want to memorialize that moment that you were in the presence of. And then that's where I lose it.
Yeah.
Of what?
Well, Greg, it brings me also back to this idea. It's like, I'm now connected to that person.
Yeah.
It's like suddenly I have a direct connection that puts me in proximity with them, but also that I am able to take away and kind of look back at and kind of remember that connection. Because I do think a lot of this has to do with the idea of connection to others, but like others that we've put into this hierarchy where they have this like importance in our society.
Yeah, but what? So I agree. But what is it? Have you ever been in the proximity of a celebrity?
Of course.
Okay. Well, excuse me. Are you counting me?
No.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you. What was that like? Because there's a sort of pull. The closest that I've ever been. So I brushed up against Donald Rumsfeld on an aircraft carrier. And honestly, just from like seeing him on TV and like, back in, 20 years ago, it was kind of like a big figure. I felt, I don't know. I can't describe the emotion, but I
have
felt
so many
something.
questions. Wait, who is Donald Rumsfeld? Is he like Mr. Belvedere or something?
No, Donald Rumsfeld was some important, he might have been Secretary of State. That could be, or some kind of military type.
That's your celebrity passing?
I mean, I haven't lived the most charmed life like you, Dave. I'm not interviewing celebrities every other week,
But even like outside of that, like I met Magic Johnson once. I met a few of Belle Biv DeVoe.
Okay. Okay.
I think it was Biv.
You know what? I saw Jimmy Buffett too. And outside of that context, like I was in the Red Parrot in Key West, and I saw Jimmy Buffett.
How on brand was that?
Well, I think he owned the place.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So, it made sense that he was there, but I don't know. It is just sort of like, so when you're around these celebrities, how do you feel? Do you feel that do you automatically feel like you're in the presence of something greater than you?
So, no, I don't, but I have. Like, I've definitely, so I guess we can jump ahead. Like, so the idea of being starstruck is also part of this, right? Because that is something, a reaction. That's kind of what you're describing almost.
Yes.
Like that idea, like what is being starstruck? It's being starstruck is, I know that I have this moment with this person and there's so much pressure that I'm putting on myself because of the importance that they have in my life that I've put in on them. Nothing that they've actually done. It's just my own importance that I've inflicted on them. I have all this nervous energy that's putting this pressure that I have to say the perfect thing. And that there's this idea that I know that there's like time restriction, and like, I'm not going to be like, this moment's going to not last forever. So it's like, I just have to get out the perfect thing. And then we just can't, because
because why? Because if you say the perfect thing, then maybe it's like this fantasy that it leads you down this path where like all of a sudden now I'm with a celebrity and that elevates me.
Or that it just is going to be impactful to them.
Okay.
Right? Like it could be that, Greg. Yeah, 100%. Like I think that would be everybody's dream. But even just knowing, like, imagine if you went up to a celebrity that you really appreciate and you said something and you're like, that was the best fucking thing I ever heard. And then you walk away, you're like, yes, that would.
And he's talking about you on interviews and.
Oh my God, that would make your life.
So what about this idea of like being starstruck? And this is just off the top of my head. I'm not sure if this makes sense at all, but so you're used to seeing these people in a different context. You see them in sort of, I don't want to say like a fantasy world, but then when you see them in person, it's like they step into your reality. and like this odd feeling of
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
fantasy stepping into reality.
Right.
And it's worlds are colliding, like George Costanza says. Is
Yeah.
that
I would love to know if being starstruck existed when, like, what I was talking about, like during the American Revolution with like military generals, if people were like, oh my God, and they couldn't speak or something, did it exist then? Or does it exist now because we have this layer in between us always with celebrities where like we view them, either we put them up on these giant stages or we're viewing them on a TV or in movie theaters where they're larger than life. They're the size of Godzilla on movie screens. Like, is it because of all these like layers that are in between us that we feel they're so far away or distant? And then when they actually, like you said, they step into our worlds, it becomes just overwhelming for us?
well, I think that it's making me think of like how it started, talking about it that way. So I think historically and evolutionary, like you could only have so much influence on like, 20, 30, 40 people, right? And what started bringing groups of people together, masses of people all seeing the same thing as something important, was this religious element where you have to create something that we all can get behind and say, yes, we believe in that. And I think there's some level of that with celebrity. Like we believe in them, or we all have this like genuine appreciation for them. And I'm just not sure. Is it some kind of perversion of religion, something that's sort of innate in us, that we're always looking for like something greater than us? Is that what it is?
So, Greg, this is what I'm not disagreeing with you. I want to take it a step further, back to something that we commonly touch on. And I think the first time we talked about it might have been the dark psychology episode, actually. Um,
Shout out to the
we're-
most popular episode of all time.
yes, of all time. We're always looking for a hierarchy, right?
Hmm?
And we just constantly look for people to lead, and then there's the role of everybody else, pretty much,
Yeah.
right? So naturally, as a society or as humankind, we're constantly putting people in elevated positions. It's just like we try, like, so we talked about it with socialism once, like how it just never ends up being what it's meant to be, because naturally we just somehow instill a hierarchy in it. We can't just have everybody on equal playing fields. So I think it's like I think even if religion never existed, we would still be doing hierarchies. It just always is. There's always a leader. There's always, I heard the phrase used like hunter gatherer,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's everybody else, right? So the people that we identify as dominant, or the traits or qualities that we identify as a society to be dominant in that time, are who ends up being at the top of the hierarchy. Right now, if you're really good at talking and entertaining, and like if you are hyperactive to the point where like you're always moving and people are enthralled with that, you're probably going to be a social media influencer.
So there is a
And
connection to like fame and usefulness. And that's not to say, so you're saying social media influencers. So that's not to say like Kim Kardashian or Snooki. Like you might think like, well, those people aren't useful, but so many people are using them
it's
to
entertainment,
break from their own life.
right? It's entertainment. And that's what I'm saying. Like our society now has deemed like we don't really care what people do. It's more about like who they are and how we get connection to them. Or like sometimes it's not even like I feel so connected to it. It's like it's so opposite from what I know that I enjoy watching that. Because it's like I said with that leisure time, it's like we're filling our time and we're just trying to determine how we want to fill our time and what we find entertaining. That's the most important thing to society, it seems like.
Okay. I think we've gotten into a good place with that. But let me ask you this. So we're talking about how we elevate celebrities. What explains the idea? And I don't know, maybe you do. Why do we feel no aversion, or when a celebrity completely dives, when they lose everything?
So that's a great question. Here's something that, if we think, all right, so I was hearing a story about an actress and she was connected to this comedian. And at some point, he raped her at a party. She ended up passing away in the hospital like the next day or something. He drugged her, raped her, and she was in the hospital. And he was charged for murder. But like what ended up happening was during this whole thing, there became like split sides in the story. So some people were like, oh, well, she, and they were kind of knocking her qualities, and people started knocking her, like knocking him. And, like people became split. And I think like that is, and it was all in like, he said, she said stuff. It was like, rumor mill stuff. And like that story kind of highlights like what people started to find more connection with. So then it's like less about who the person is and more about just hearing all the gossip and like all the
you can talk about them as if they're not real people,
right?
And
it becomes the most interesting thing. It's
almost like they have a duty too. Like part of their contract is we'll love you until we don't. And if something, when we don't, and you got paid for that or whatever it is, like, because people will, like Britney Spears, people loved her. And then when they saw her fall, they, loved to laugh about her and they felt nothing about it. So this is someone, it just seems like you will disregard or dispose of a celebrity very quick, more than you would someone in your own life. You would never act that way towards someone in your own life, but somehow because they have this degree of fame, you feel entitled that you have every right to bask in their downfall because it makes yourself feel better about your own life.
There's another thing that happens too, which I think is interesting. So there's the public downward spiral, but then there's the tragic death without like a big production, and that gets a totally different response. So for example, the rapper Mac Miller, there was an actor on Euphoria that passed away this past year, kind of
a similar looking guy.
They were kind of similar looking. But like you didn't hear or watch them spiral. Jonathan Brandis from Neverending Story 2.
Yeah. From I guess you're gonna say Neverending Story. I would have said Ladybugs.
Oh yeah, that's true. Neverending Story 2.
Or Sidekicks.
There was the guy in the movie Kids. I think it was Casper. The dark-haired one. I can't remember if he was Casper. He also committed suicide. But like, no, we didn't watch their downward spiral. We just saw the after effect, and that gets treated a lot differently. It's way more like, oh, it never happens, and it is super tragic. But both instances are tragic. But we less acknowledge the person who's having mental health crises in front of the world, and we kind of diminish their experience versus the person who has the tragic death.
Yeah, it's almost like completely irrational to say like, oh, it's okay to laugh at them because they're still suffering.
Yeah.
Right? That's a dark way to think about this.
It really is. I think that part of like what I didn't answer about your question is part of why we love it so much, or why it's so loved. Is because I think it kind of humanizes and then also makes people feel like, haha, my life, I have more control over my life than that person that's supposedly famous. Like, I feel like it's almost like that envy, or just, it's like, it's fueled by something negative.
Or narcissism. Sure. Like we're saying, like we all have these narcissistic traits where we feel better about ourselves when we see someone we maybe thought was better than us fall.
Yeah.
It makes us feel better naturally. It just does. It elevates us.
Yes. So we're like putting people up in these positions because of things that, it's not really anything they're doing. It's just who they are. But then we're instantly getting like envious of them for those things. And then we're like sort of smiling and happy when they fail.
You know what else is an interesting thing about celebrities? Like we have way more access to celebrities than we ever had, right? We can watch them on TikTok, or maybe not TikTok. I don't know. I don't have TikTok, but Instagram, they're all over that, and Twitter, and we see their moods. We see what they're thinking about. But I think it's the celebrities that keep more to themselves and stay more anonymous that keep that huge level of celebrity. And I'm talking about like Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise.
Forever, I thought like Keanu Reeves was that. Like, I feel like, but now, like more, I feel like in the more recent years, you see more about his personal life.
When you do that, when you're seeing more about his personal life, or maybe he makes an Instagram post, man, he's taking a dip. That's like what I immediately think, because Clooney's not on Instagram
Social
making
media,
posts.
yeah.
You know,
Right.
It's interesting, and that's how they keep that level of that status. And there's something interesting like about that to me too. I don't.
Yeah. So the more accessible they become, which you would think people would love, the more we view them in a way that's almost like we diminish who they are, and like, you know, we almost kind of like laugh when they fall.
We like for them to be accessible because that's when we could start like subconsciously examining all their flaws. Oh, well, they're not so great here. They're not so great here. They're not so great here. But when they stay out of our view, we keep them on the pedestal. It is that,
Right.
It's that ideology, that idol, you know, it's almost religious. It really is. I can't think of another way to describe it. And, you know, with all celebrities, most of the time, what goes up must come down 90% of the time, right? How many celebrities do we know that just have just stayed famous their entire life without dying young?
Yeah. That's a tough thing for people to do. There's so many pressures out there, and that's a whole nother topic itself, probably because of
DiCaprio. DiCaprio's been going strong for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, and he's interesting too, because like he's like feels very private. The glimpses you catch is like somebody posted a video and he's in a nightclub with a black hat on with sunglasses, and he's smoking cigarettes in the back or something like that with like a model next to him. But like, it's never like him doing the videos himself. Like, it's always somebody, he's in the background somewhere. And like, sometimes you'll catch him doing weird things, but it actually, because he's not like flaunting it, and it's like, it feels very like, oh my God, it's got a glimpse of this like secret life that he has. It feels cool to watch.
I know. It's so strange.
Whereas if somebody who does constantly keep their phone camera on them all the time and is posting all the time and does the same stuff, we'd be laughing at them. They'd be a mockery.
Yeah, absolutely. 100. Yeah, that's
so the other thing is like, it feels like when a celebrity, no matter what their status is, when they are more accessible, it almost feels like I could have the possibility to interact with them. Like tagging a celebrity on social media
is in a sense interacting, right?
And if they actually respond back, or if they like your photo, it feels like, but like we're almost at a point, I feel like, in society where it's not out of the realm of possibility that a big celebrity could like your photo. Like, I've seen it. This isn't a big celebrity, but I remember like Fred Durst liked a photo and I was like, Fred Durst just liked my photo. But
That's
now I'm like, if it happened like today, I don't know if I would think the same, because I don't know, because it already happened. And I'm like, now that I've had that experience, it feels less exciting the next time it happens, depending on who it is, I guess.
Well, this is giving me an idea, or maybe a segue to shift into a different segment of our podcast.
Sure.
Because I'm starting to get stalky vibes of you and Fred Durst.
No. Yeah, he's stalking me.
Or I thought you were stalking him, maybe.
Or
like, maybe he's stalking you. You're right. He's
please don't like and comment on my photo.
All right. So listen, this is this happens a lot with celebrities, but you brought up the idea to talk about stalking alongside this, and I think it's a great idea. And this is another interesting psychological phenomenon that I thought I understood more than I really do. So, like, even stalking itself, like, what is it? It's not just harassment, because it's like a pattern of harassment. It's this unwanted, obsessive attention.
Yeah.
And there's so many levels of creepiness when it comes to stalking, starting with the feeling of being watched. Now, I know you've had that. Like, can you think of an example when you feel like you're being watched?
My cat when she's hungry.
Okay. This happens to me all the time when I'm in the shower, Dave. Honestly, like I'll have like soap in my eyes. I don't have any hair, so it's like not a huge deal. Kind of like a quick rinse. But
that was too much info.
Okay. I mean, say okay, and no matter what I say right now, it's going to be too much info, right?
So you feel like you're being watched in the shower?
Yes, I do. Sometimes you have that feeling, you know. Not that I think anybody would want to. It's just it's my own feeling.
Do you have a window in your shower?
Not in the shower, no. But I do have a window.
So you think there's like cameras?
There could be some kind of elaborate mirror system where people People are checking in on me, but who knows? But this obviously is something that mostly happens to women and not people like me. Okay. And what I think is funny, not funny, but interesting is there's quite a few different categories of stalkers.
Okay.
And it kind of leads us to like why people stalk.
Oh, explain.
Okay. So the first one is an intimacy seeker. Now, this is often mentally ill, delusional, or schizophrenic, and they believe that the person they're stalking, they don't like them right now, but they believe that if they get to know them a little bit, they can really make them learn to love them.
Oh, so they believe the person doesn't like them right now. The other person doesn't. It's not all right. I thought you were mean like they don't like the person they're stalking that much.
No, but they can.
But I can learn to love them if I stalk them hard enough.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's like the one that I would have like assumed to be the most common.
It's not.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So we'll get to all of them.
That's like the random fans stalking the celebrity actress story that you hear.
I wouldn't even say celebrity.
Didn't Jennifer Aniston have one of those?
We'll talk about the type that would be more connected with celebrity, but this one's more like, say you go to the bank and the lady gives you a lollipop and you're like, oh God, okay. I didn't realize that she was in love with me. And, you start, she
slow
has
down,
no idea.
lady.
Yeah, she has no idea you feel the way, all of a sudden you love her and you think that over time you're really going to get her to love you too.
Speaking of dum-dums.
And you're right, a dum-dum. Very good. Not bad. Hopefully that joke went over because that's not bad. So the number 2 is rejected. So obviously this is like difficult to deter with restraining orders, and this is going to be the type of person who tried to ask someone out and the person said no, and they're going to be sort of angry about it. And this can be sort of one of the more dangerous types of stalking.
Sure.
And what's the thing is, it's like, even if you call the police, it's pretty difficult for the law enforcement to intervene with stalking.
Yeah, I would agree on that. They would have to because you need evidence. You can't just arrest someone for because of a anecdotal story about what they did, unless it was really illegal. But if they just harassed you a little bit, it'd be hard.
Or maybe they gave you unwanted gifts. Where I got this, they keep sending me these gifts and the police are like, well, how do you know it's them? And they know it's them because there's a little nuance to it, but it can't really be proven. Or maybe they're driving by your house a bunch, and is that illegal? Or maybe even they're hanging out across the street or showing up at bars where you are or showing up at your work. And all this stuff can kind of be explained away by the person, but it feels really creepy and scary for the people, the person being
that one's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So predatory stalkers are the ones that are going to be into deviant sexual practices. They intend violence or sexual assault. So there was this movie I once watched. It was on Lifetime, and there was this man who was breaking into women's house and stealing their underwear.
Yeah.
And this is what this kind of stalker would be, because this escalated into, he ended up being a murderer. So that brings me to this alarming statistic that half of women who are murdered by serial killers have reported stalking first.
Well, yeah.
That's a huge number.
And, you would assume that's the case for most of them, because they got to learn their patterns in order to be able to, find them at their vulnerable times. So.
You're absolutely right. So it should be 100%. It's just the 50% of serial killers aren't that great at it.
Yeah.
The good
I wonder,
ones,
what that story you just said reminded me of a Richard Ramirez type deal.
Hey, listen, the Night Stalker. Yeah. It wasn't him though. It was a true story. It was based on a Canadian military officer.
It's based on a Nancy Drew story.
Yeah. The next category is resentful. So they feel mistreated, humiliated. They have these ruminating thoughts and obsessions. They feel incompetent, maybe in some cases, where they're driven by lust and they're lonely, but they cannot get any women to be interested in them. So they become, resentful and want to hurt them.
Yeah.
And this is something when you think of like, I don't know, incels. Have you heard of incels?
I've heard
Like
of it.
these type of communities where they hate women just because they can't figure out how to make any women like them.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be really kind of scary and dark, right?
That is scary and dark.
Here's another one that I think you're going to find interesting. Okay, yeah. So here's one that I think you're going to find. I don't think so, but okay. So here's one you're going to find interesting, and I mean this genuinely. I thought of you when I read this. So false victimization syndrome, because I know you like the syndromes. This is an interesting idea that it's someone pretending to be a victim of stalkers. So it's like a Munchausen, but
for stalking.
But for stalkers, yeah. So I mean, if I'm trying to think of an example, it's like, wait, you're just going to the police and being like, look, they keep leaving these rose petals in my dress, but you're doing it, and for whatever reason, you want people to think that you're being stalked.
It's like sending flowers to yourself at work, so everyone will.
And then you're like, oh.
Or I can't believe you did it again and told me how beautiful I was again.
Oh no, crap! You're scaring me now, because when I was in high school and probably junior high, I used to write "I love Greg Charpentier" in all the books, so that people would think people love Greg Charpentier. Yeah, I just talked about this.
Just someone.
Someone loves this guy. I don't know who. But you would think like that puts in the mind of others something about this guy.
You know, interesting thing, and like in our stories here, I feel like we're both kind of assuming, and this is like the one time I think I can get you to agree that we're both wrong by this.
Okay.
We're both kind of assuming it's like male towards female. But like it definitely can go the other way.
Absolutely. Overwhelmingly male towards female, though.
Really? Overwhelmingly, though?
Overwhelming. Well, no, that's actually not true. So this can happen in some cases and in some places that matters, right? Like it does matter, the demographics. It could be almost 50% of the time. But it is overwhelmingly more dangerous for women.
Oh, I thought you were going to say overwhelmingly more reported.
Oh, and probably reported too. That makes sense. I
guarantee you that some men would feel embarrassed to report, or maybe they would just deal with it like and hope it's going to pass or whatever. I just feel like their response might be different just because of different things, unless it got to a point obviously where it's like super dangerous. But
yeah, okay, well you're right, you're absolutely right, and now I'm embarrassed. You are right. Here's another category, moving right along. So love obsessional. So this is kind of related to the first one we talked about. It's a stranger or an acquaintance, and there's just the hope at love. The stalker becomes obsessed with this person. Domestic. Now, the most common type is a domestic stalker, and this is when you're in a relationship, and for whatever reason it ends, and whoever didn't want it to end becomes a stalker and makes life very difficult for them. I mean, it could be causing problems for them at work, causing problems for them at school, spreading rumors about them. This is all part of stalking. So, and this is making me think like there's something interesting, like a phenomenon happening here where it's, all right, Dave, think about it like this. Say I have this, like I'm young, we'll have to go way back for that. And there's this woman and she's sending me flowers and she's writing me notes and it's so over. She's texting me all the time. She's driving by my house, but I like her. Right? It's not stalking if I like it, right? But if it's someone doing all the exact same behaviors and they have the exact same intentions, then now I feel I'm being stalked.
When you first defined stalking, you used a word that is exactly this. And I almost reiterated the word because that's the one word that, like, when I think of stalking, has to be there. Unwanted. It has to be unwanted in order for it to be stalking.
Okay. So I'm glad that you agree with me. It's almost like you're falling into my trap. So historically, though, we teach, well, in movies and everything, isn't there this idea that perseverance?
You are hitting an idea I was having as you were talking on the head, because I almost, as you're describing these, I was like, I feel like I've seen that scenario in a movie, but
Yeah.
like it's framed in like a positive way.
Yeah.
So I feel like I would be awesome if like we just took notes when we see like older movies demonstrating like questionable behavior and making it like, I feel like in like, especially like romantic movies, you see characters at times, especially like male characters, be like way forceful or like overbearing or stalkish.
You remember
And
that
it's-
movie Big Fish?
Yes.
And
Yep.
you know how there's that girl and she's engaged, and he's like, you know what? I'm just gonna hang out in this town and send her flowers every day or whatever. Wait around to
Yeah.
like get another piece of information about her, and it's like, oh, that's romantic because it ended up working out. But the guy that she was with ended up like dying on the toilet or whatever, so no one tells his story.
Yeah.
There's so, and that's like, you know, grandparents will tell stories where, oh, I didn't like him at first, but he kept showing up, and then one day I was just like, the hell with it.
Yep.
That's a common story.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a
Oh my God. Back to the Future.
Back
He
to the
gets
Future.
he gets way too much information about his mom, gives it to his future
Mhm.
future dad, like intrusive amounts of information about her, sets it up, and like they like pretty much stalk her, and then sets it up so that he's going to look like a hero, and totally like dupes her into falling in love with him so that he doesn't get stuck in the past.
And that's what an insidious movie that is when you really think about it. Because
When he's
not
in his
only is he
tiny
encouraging
whities.
stalking, he's encouraging stalking of his own. Because if he doesn't, he ceases to exist.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy, huh? So this is psychological abuse. You know, it really is. I mean,
By Marty McFly.
that's the second mention of Marty McFly this episode. But you know it's happening. There's a creepiness. There's a sense of it. But you know, it's scary when you know who it is. It's scarier, I think, sometimes if you don't know who it is. And as a victim of stalking, I can imagine.
I'm sorry, Greg.
No, listen. It
Ah.
sounded like before, like maybe you. I should be sorry talking to you. It feels like the victim, like their life's infected, right? By some kind. It changes every aspect of your life. Your life stinks while you're being stalked.
Is there also a category for people who feel really depressed that they've never been stalked?
I don't think so.
Oh.
That's interesting though. And you're I think you're being, well, so here's the thing, right? So stalkers, you're talking about a mental health issue there for sure. And with stalking, I don't think stalking in and of itself is a disorder, but you know, it can be a byproduct of schizophrenia, any delusion disorders, mania. I think there's a degree of desperation there in stalking.
Mhm.
But I don't know if this is going to come off right, but is it ever possible, because there's, you know, a mental health component there, that the stalker is also a victim in a sense, a victim of their own
Mental health.
Yeah, which sucks. But I think,
Think about this. Like, part of their mind frame I wonder, like, it makes me wonder like what their frame of mind is when they're engaged in that kind of behavior, like with the thoughts about the other person. There must be like this sense of like, it's meant to be though. Like they're so convinced it's meant to be. Why is this, like, I have to just continue to do this or this? It's like,
well, that's delusion.
But it's also like this idea like of what was I going to say? I kind of lost my thought for a second. If I just do this one thing, like maybe I'll change the way they look at me, or they'll look at me. It's like, it's kind of like looking at someone as if they're famous. It's idolization.
Absolutely.
Which falls into this whole fame thing. And like, we didn't really touch on idolization at all, but that's a piece of this. Like, we idolize someone.
Yeah, like I guess you could be famous to someone and not be famous to others, right?
Yeah. So
or
fame
like
is
small
like
little pockets of fame.
Is idolization like the bigger thing here, and then fame is an offshoot of idolization because it's like people that we, like, our society deems as like being of importance, but idolization is like its own big thing that's like the umbrella of everything.
Well, it's like you get in this delusional state and you have this idea of how things could be, and you think that the person that you're infatuated with will be happy if these things just go the way you can see them going. And even if they're like, please stop, it's like, no, like just listen. Like it becomes this really desperate thing. And it also reminds me of the way we described personality disorders, where if you think of this huge bubble and normally you would have all these different characteristics. So like even in a person, you would have like your job, your family, your school, whatever, like all these different things. With the person who's stalking, all they have taking up all that space in their mind is just this one person, and they can't see anything else. And that it gets in the way of logic. It gets in the way of everything in their own lives too.
Yeah.
It's just they become so focused. And that brings us back to the ADHD episode, because this is a perfect example of focus not always being the best. And sometimes you need to zoom out a little bit and see, like, look at what the way you're behaving. Look at the way you're making this person feel. This is wild.
Yeah.
I thought it'd be fun, Dave. Like, if you got something else to say on it, go ahead. But
well, I wanted to go back to the Starstruck topic for a second.
All right.
Because I had something that I kind of came to mind.
Yeah, and you're right, because I didn't even mention the celebrity type of stalking. But go ahead.
Okay. Well, with Starstruck, we talked about like a response to it. When you picture Starstruck, what do you picture, Greg? Like what kind of response?
Like, lost for words.
Yeah.
So
Starstruck, I feel like it's a biological experience, right? We're talking about an increase of anxiety. The brain processing is slowing down because something's obviously being triggered. It must impact the Broca's area of the brain.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right? Because that's the part that affects language.
Yeah.
And when we're starstruck, we can't get language out. So therefore, it has to be hitting our amygdala.
Yep.
And
so you're saying it's a trauma response?
It's some sort of response. I guess trauma, quote unquote, trauma response. But like essentially, it's just like like not really fight or freeze, but it's like a version of that.
Yeah.
Because it's getting adrenaline rushing, and our brain is firing off these signals, and they're not all going in the direction we want them to. Have you ever been starstruck?
No.
I have once, and I talk about it because it was such a weird experience. And it was like, I was not expecting it at all. Like you would think. So I met the actor Robert Englund, who played Freddy Krueger. I love Freddy Krueger.
That'll do it for you.
I was not starstruck. I talked to him just fine. I actually I never know what to say to celebrities when I meet them, but like he talks a lot and he's like super nice. So that was like actually really fine. That's not starstruck. Like not knowing what to say to someone is just not knowing what to say to someone, not being good conversational.
I'd be starstruck every day.
Yeah. But I met Ray Wise, who played Leland Palmer on the show Twin Peaks back in the 90s and late 80s, early 90s. And I'm a huge Twin Peaks fan. I have such nostalgia for it. I've watched it like the show 1,000 times. I met him and I instantly went into this place in my brain where I was like, I cannot believe I am seeing this person who I've seen on TV 1,000 times. Of his character is just like iconic to me. And I went up to him. I literally couldn't get a word out. Wow. My mouth opened and I wanted to say stuff and I sounded like an absolute idiot. And my friend I was with, he actually talked for me and was like, he's a huge fan. And I'm like, yeah. I just couldn't get it out. And I walked away. I was so freaking embarrassed. I was like, because I think I ended up being able to like collect myself a little bit and say like some of what I wanted to say. But I was like, I had this one moment and it brought me back to this idea. Like I had this one moment. I knew it was not going to be very long. And I just wanted to tell him how important of a role he played for me in my life. Cause that show I like super connected with and I always refer back to it. And I like barely got to say that.
So maybe it wasn't the star itself. Maybe it's not the pressure from the star itself, but it's pressure for the moment. Like the pressure to perform in the moment.
That's what I mean. It's like that time, there's a time restriction. You want to get everything out. You want to make it sound important and you want it to be impactful. Because my biggest thing is I wanted to be able to say something and for him to be like, thank you so much.
Yeah. I love you. I love your work. That's all you get. Yeah. So listen, to continue on with the celebrity part of this, erotomania, and that is a delusion disorder, but it's when people incorrectly believe that the victim is in love with them. And if not for a few external barriers forcing them apart, they would be together with their celebrity love. And this is how it's, stalking celebrities becomes kind of a thing. David Letterman famously had a stalker too, and she ended up actually killing herself. It's really sad, but she was schizophrenic. Some of them, there's going to be some delusions, obviously, especially with this type. This is, 100% going to be a mental health disorder because they are completely in the belief that the celebrity is in love with them, so they have to get to the celebrity.
Yeah.
And I think it's sort of rare that the person ever really contacts a celebrity, but whatever. So I think that moving on here, just for the sake of time, it'd be fun to just go through a little bit of pop culture. And I didn't use anything to find movies that had stalkers in them. I just kind of came off the top of the head with this one. And let me know if any of these hit you or if you have anything to add to this. So I watched the Watcher show with my son.
Yep.
I thought it was great.
I liked it. It was fun.
I thought it was fun too. There's gonna be a Watcher 2. I don't know what happens that, like, still watching, I guess. Cape Fear.
Yeah. Yeah. Which one?
Great. Wait, which one? The De Niro.
Okay.
Is there another one?
Yeah, the original one.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
That's a remake.
Whoops. Taxi Driver. De Niro again.
Taxi Driver.
Stalker.
Love
right?
that role.
It's awesome. Well, so Fatal Attraction.
Mental health. Big mental health like movie right there.
You want to know another? Let's see. And this one on so many levels. Robin Williams in 1 Hour Photo. Have you ever seen that?
Yes, I love that movie. He is so good in that.
He's so awesome in that. And that's so I don't know if we're getting across how creepy stalking can be. And that's why I thought maybe bringing a little pop culture, because that always helps frame it. If you watch 1 Hour Photo, it's that feeling of, here's this person looking at intimate pictures of your family, or just seeing you do things that you think no one's watching.
Yeah.
There's something super creepy about that.
I have a good reference for this. There's a film by David Lynch called Lost Highway. And the first 10 minutes of it or so, Bill Pullman is the main character, and he's getting these tapes at his door. And they're VHS tapes, and he puts it in. The first tape, it's like somebody's home recording his front door.
Mm.
And then the next day, or a few days later, the tapes progressively get more and more creepy. The person's actually inside his house video recording. And then the final tape, before something else happens, the person goes into his bedroom and he's sleeping and they're recording him.
That's why Scream works. That's why it's like someone's entered your space. That's what you're talking about.
And it's even worse. It's one thing to think about someone breaking into your home. That feels like an invasion of privacy. But the idea that you're there, you were unharmed, they left, and then you find out is terrifying.
Listen, there was this story. You want to hear something terrifying? There was this story of this woman who she thought she had rats in her attic. And so every night she'd be like, oh, I hear that. I hear that. And then she would fall asleep. And over a period of time, she eventually got this email. And the email was a series of pictures. And it would be this person with you wouldn't be able to see his face or anything like that, but he had his he was like laying on her when she was sleeping and stuff like that. It was like her pictures of her in her room and someone around her. It's that's how dark this stuff is. It's terrifying. Yeah.
I have a good one.
Go ahead.
Misery.
Misery is great. Is Misery okay? And imagine that you're a stalker, but the person you want to stalk falls into your lap.
Yeah. But she's and she knows everything about him. She's a super fan. Yeah.
Now, is you talking just the movie alone, or are you talking about the book?
Well, the movie, I guess, because I don't think I've read the book.
Well, I mean, I hear the book's better. I don't usually say that, but whatever. But Swim Fan, remember that one?
Yeah, Swim Fan. Yeah.
Selena goes murdered by a stalker, essentially. Okay. So The Gift is a movie I just recently saw. It's Jason Bateman.
Yeah.
It's a really cool kind of stalker movie. And then Fear.
Oh yeah, Mark Wahlberg.
Yep, that was a great one.
I always hated the dog scene.
Yeah, it's tough, dude.
Why do they have to go there?
There are some scenes that are okay though.
Wild horses.
That's right. So there's something about Mary. That's a stalker movie. Actually, a funny story, real quick. I don't know.
Matt Dillon's character.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I saw that movie before it came out. The hospital was able to get it because I had my good friend growing up, Luke Logan. We were in like 6th grade or 7th grade, and he got sick and no one knew what it was. He was in the hospital for months, and they like named it Luke Logan disease.
Oh.
So that was pretty dark. We thought he was going to die, but he didn't. And I think, so I guess, all right, here's something I'm going to say about stalking. Trust your gut, guys and girls, because it can happen to any of us. I think trusting your gut's a huge thing. People often don't like really give it a lot of credit, but you gotta remember your gut's your subconscious mind, and that is always taking notes of what's dangerous and what's not. So if your gut tells you something doesn't feel right, listen to it.
Yeah. And that's why it's really important to have excellent gut health.
That's right. So
take care of your gut.
Probiotics, proud sponsor of the podcast. That's right.
Also, would paparazzi be considered stalkers? Is it okay if you're paid to do it or if you're making money off of it?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Right? I mean, like they are constantly following people around, trying to get tips to find out where people are going to be. I mean, it is stalkerish behavior.
So it's funny that you mentioned like it's important the way you frame it, because when we were kids in my neighborhood, we used to sometimes like be looking in people's windows. I don't think we weren't doing anything nefarious, but we were definitely looking in people's windows, and we would call it like we were playing spies, but we were really just peeping toms, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like how you frame these things is pretty important.
You didn't mention Peeping Tom, considered to be one of the first slasher films ever made, I believe.
You're right. I didn't mention that. I have no idea what that is.
Peeping Tom.
Okay. All right.
Check her out.
And I think, I've got nothing else on this, fame or stalking, but this was actually a fun one.
This is fun. As you guys can tell, it's a lot more subjective than most of our episodes because we're kind of making our own connections, which hopefully we did okay with. So I hope we can get some feedback from everybody. Let us know.
It sounds like you got a tough email, dude. That's what it's sounding like. Like, did someone come at us?
No, I actually had the opposite. I had a nice response recently from someone reaching out to us on social media and said they like our topics and discussions. So I thought that was really cool. And then he offered a topic that actually is definitely on our list and we are going to get to. And I think we should prioritize it for him and for the other person that recommended it.
What is it?
I can't say that right now.
Oh, okay.
That's a secret, Greg.
Fair enough. I'm sorry.
Secret.
How dare I?
All right. So here's what we need you guys to do. We need you to have a great night. Thank you for listening. Please continue listening because we need it. We need an audience. Otherwise, it's just me and Greg. And how pathetic is this? No, I'm just kidding. We'd probably do this regardless, even if nobody was listening.
Yeah, of course.
We're sadistic and we like sometimes disagreeing with each other to the point and then convincing each other that we're agreeing. So and that it's healthy.
It is healthy. And I think on this one, we weirdly were on the same page.
Yeah, there was not many disagreements at all.
And that's okay too. This one was fun for me.
Everyone's like, I hated this episode.
I don't know if I loved the last episode. This one I feel a little differently about.
Ooh. Hot take.
Right. Yeah, it's a hot take.
You heard it here first. All right. Well, thank you everybody again for listening. If you feel compelled, we'd love to hear some feedback. You can either reach out to us on social media and let us know, or if you want to drop a rating and review on iTunes or wherever else you can do that, that'd be super appreciated. We just really love hearing that people are either connecting or not connecting to our work. And more often than not, people are willing to share the latter instead of the former. So if you do like it, we'd love to hear it. Thank you again. And everybody have yourself a nice little evening. do something special for yourself. Right, Greg?
I think I agree.
Pamper it up.
That's right.
Peace out.
Self-care.